So in this video, I want to look at a problem from your homework from section 2.5, which is all about transformations. And I just want to illustrate how to use the graphing palette, because that sometimes can be a challenge for students, is to try to get used to using this palette online. The main thing that you need to take away from the transformations is, yes, you could graph it by hand by making a plot of ordered pairs. We have nice graphing calculators that will do those kinds of things for us, but it is nice for you to be able to look at an equation and be able to tell some basic things. It will help you as you go on with more mathematics to be able to look at equations and functions and be able to tell just some basic things. So I've already answered the first part of this question, and it's asking me what transformations has been done to g of x equal to -4 times x minus 6 squared minus 5. So we see that inside the parentheses here, since it's x minus 6, that's going to shift it to the right 6 units. Remember, that's backwards from what you normally would think. So x minus 6 actually moves it to the right. And the way that helps me remember that is I think about what number I'd have to plug in here to make this 0. And I'd have to plug in positive 6, which helps me remember that I need to move it to the right 6 units. And then the negative out front here reflects me over the x-axis. That negative out front reflects over the x-axis. And then this minus 5 is shifting my graph down 5 units. And then that 4 is stretching my graph vertically by a factor of 4. Since that's bigger than 1, it stretches. If you get something that's less than 1, so like a fraction like 1/4, 1/2, 1/3, something like that, that would shrink it. But in this case, since it's bigger than 1, that's going to stretch it by a factor of 4. So I've answered that part correctly. So now what it's asking me to do is it's asking me to graph this function. So a couple different things I can do. I can zoom in, or I can click right here to enlarge my graph. And so if you click over there where it says click to enlarge, then it'll pull up this window here, and you can do the different things that it's asking you to do. So in this case, I can choose the palette that works for me, which in this case is this parabola of the squared tool. So I can click on that squared tool, and that will allow me to graph transformations of y equal to x squared. So if I click on the x squared tool, which is what I need for this problem, then I can do all the different things that it's going to ask me to do here. So once I click on that tool, then I can just click, and that'll bring the parabola up for me. So you want to click on the squared tool and then click over here on your graph. It doesn't matter where you click on your graph, it'll just make that appear. And then down here is where you do everything that it wants you to do. So we want to, which is why you've got to be able to recognize from the equation. So we want to stretch this by a factor of 4 vertically. So I'm going to stretch it by a factor of 4 vertically. That's what the 4 does. And then we don't have any horizontal stretching or shrinking. We don't discuss horizontal or stretching or shrinking in this class. So we only worry about the vertical stretching or shrinking. And then down here it says, what's my vertical shift? So my vertical shift is -5. So I would type in -5 because that is my vertical shift. And then my horizontal shift would be +6, since it's 6 units to the right. And then down here is asking me which axis is it reflected over, if any. In this case, it's reflected over the x-axis. So that shifted it right 6. My vertical shift, sorry about that, should have been a -5. So that shifted it down 5. I guess the negative didn't get entered in there. So right 6, down 5 with a -5, reflected over the x-axis and vertical stretch of 4. So in your mind, just think about, which is good that I made that mistake, I caught myself in the fact that I knew it should have been right 6 from the origin, so it should have been right 6, and it should have been down 5, so at least should have been down there to begin with, so that's why it didn't belong up there. So right 6 and down 5, and then I know it's reflected, so instead of opening up, it should open down, what that reflection does. And then don't forget to put that factor in there of that vertical stretch or shrink if you need it. It defaults to 1, so if this is not a 1, is where you would put in what it is, whether it's something that's 4 or 5, whatever, you would put that value in there. And then you can close that. and then save your picture, and then check your answer. Okay, so all those questions where you're having to graph, that's how you're going to do your transformations. Is you want to use that palette and that's given to you, and then you've got to be able to recognize from that equation what the -6 is doing, what the -5 is doing, what the 4 is doing to stretch or shrink, and any negatives, whether you're reflecting over the x-axis, reflecting over the y-axis respectively. So that was more just to help you with how you're going to enter your answers in MyMathLab.